And hello, everyone. I'm glad you're all here. We've got a really special webinar for you today. We're going to be talking about a path to CPO with one of the first ever CPOs out there. And I know Renee will always joke that that makes her feel dated, but it's really a testament to how impressive she is and the experience she has to share with all of you. I'll be hosting and asking some questions for this, fireside chat type format. And then if any of you have questions as we go, please ask them either in the Q&A or in the chat. And, Stephen, Reese, myself, we'll make sure we ask Renee those questions and get them all answered for you. And as I said, we've got Renee Niemi with us here today. She's the one you're all here to see. She's worked with Google, Plantronics, Logitech, many other great companies. And I'm excited to continue this career focus series we've had in the past. And you can find them on our website. And I'll share the links as we go with you for different stages of your career, how to get your next promotion, how to, find your next challenge and opportunity. We talked to an executive recruiter so you know what hiring managers are looking for. We have an ebook where we interviewed someone who literally wrote the book on what the trajectory of the PM career looks like. And that all culminates, hopefully for all of you, a seat in the C-suite with that title of CPO. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So without further ado, I will ask Renee that first question we've got for her. That'll hopefully be helpful to all of you as well. Or what are things a PM with C-suite aspirations can do today in their careers?
So first of all, thank you for that really big introduction. I don't know if I can fill those shoes, but I will try, and it's super happy to be here. I will say the difference between the C-suite and what you're doing now is it's so similar. It's just up leveled. So when you're in the C-suite, the things that matter, is less about the product, and it's much more about revenue, predictability, customer. And so what you can do today is, I'm going to just call it out, 3 things. The first is to change your lens from kind of internal and getting your product out the door to external. And what I mean by that is start to look at trends and have an informed opinion on where your space, whatever that space might be, is going to go in the future and why. It could be driven by a technology trend. Think about if you were the product manager of a taxi company and you got surprised by Uber. Those are the things that you're trying to think about and get in front of for your product. And because that is what a CPO spend a lot of time of their day doing. And you can do that today for your product. The other thing is, from an outside perspective is customers, right? So, what's really interesting is you put 3 people, the thing that's a challenge about being a product leader is you put 3 people around the table and they're going to have an opinion about your product. And so the more informed you can be regarding the decisions you make is really, really important. When you're in the C-suite, you have to lead with data and getting that customer perspective as one of those data points is really critical. So that's the first thing, get that outside perspective. The second, and I've already given a hint towards it, is the metrics. So, you're probably an amazing product manager anyway, and you're probably kind of, living in those data analytics. That's a great first start. But to be candid with you, that's only a first start. You should have a really solid understanding on how your product is contributing to the bottom line. You should have a really solid understanding on how that bottom line changes over time. You should have a really solid understanding on how your strategy and how any individual features is going to change the metrics that are important to you, whether it be, increased revenue, maybe you're trying to shift to a new audience so that you have a bigger pie to serve. Having those metrics and tracking those metrics and being kind of the king or queen of your metrics is super critical, and you'll be seen less as a product leader in that context, and you'll already start to kind of elevate your position amongst your peers and your boss because you're having a business level conversation versus just a product level conversation. And then the third thing that I really recommend that you start doing now, and you're probably already doing this, is stakeholder management. However, the stakeholders that you're likely managing are the ones directly affecting your business. Go outside your comfort zone a little bit. Like, start talking to sales managers, sales leaders, and getting their perspective. Now, be careful. Don't make commitments that you can't fulfill. But when you get into a CPO suite, what you'll find is your peers, which will be the chief revenue officer, the chief financial officer, the chief technology officer, they're going to want to be engaging in kind of, strategic level conversations with you. And so to the extent that you can, start to get used to those different stakeholders that you may not be interacting normally in a day-to-day basis is really going to give you a leg up.
Yeah, that's awesome. And thanks for sharing all that with us. And, you mentioned, getting that outside perspective, and everyone's here at this webinar to hear from, so they're already, in that process and doing the work. But I've also heard you talk about in the past how you used to keep like a network of peers that you'd take out for coffee to like pick their brains. Can you talk a little bit about that and some of the other ways you've done to gain that outside perspective?
You are so right, Andy. Thank you for bringing that up. That was my number one tool when I was kind of going up the ranks. Between customers, talking to customers and talking to peers. I ended up meeting a lot of my peers at trade shows. Remember when we used to do those in person? Those times will be back. I swear they'll be back. But I used to really use that opportunity to network and kind of create a circle around myself, particularly in the non-competitive. Obviously it gets tricky if they're competitors, but ask them, like, have you tried to, what do you do for metrics? What do you use for tools to measure your analytics? What works for you, what doesn't? And really developing that external network so that they kind of become an extension of your learning is super important at this stage. Yeah.
That's great. And that also segues nicely into my next question from you, which is, what are some of the habits from earlier in your career that helped once you were CPO?
So I'm going to tell you a little story because I think it's helpful. I worked for the company was NEC. This was many years ago. I know I don't look young enough to be back in the day, but this was back when notebook computers were about 25 pounds. And we were really trying to figure out the role of a couple key technologies, pen computing and wireless, and how wireless and pen computing were going to change the world. This was back in the early 90s. And because I became a technology expert de facto, because those were kind of, in my wheelhouse as a product manager, the sales team just grabbed me and took me to every major customer to tell the story. And what I ended up doing in that journey is I ended up learning so much about the customers, and it became a two-way conversation, not just about what we were doing and what our informed point of view was, but it was really all about what their needs were, what were some of their pain points. And so I ended up, for a year, and I'm not exaggerating, I put 150,000 domestic miles on American Airlines that year. But it was really kind of my crash course of understanding the value of customer research. And I am just going to say the product line that we ended up, and the impact on the product line that we ended up as a result of that information was incredible. So I took that learning, and from that point forward, customer feedback was just always so integral and core to everything I do. And by the way, it gives you really, really important credibility with the sales team. And it develops that rapport with the sales team that are always one of your most important stakeholders. So that was the first habit. The second habit was really around, I'm a curious person by nature. Maybe too curious sometimes, but so by that nature, I was always chit-chatting with people and collaborating with people because I was curious. And what I found specifically in the product management world, that those collaborations turned into really, really important conversations. I learned so much, and so many of them were informal. It could have been just the lunchroom and me walking out and say, hey, how you doing? Sitting down with, the CFO or, the director of finance, just having lunch and just starting to have conversations and understanding their pain points. And the more that you do that, especially in product management, that cross-functional, how to get, your ideas sold through the org is so critical. And it was a habit I learned really, really early on, and all stem from curiosity, which I'm sure many of you have. The irony is that as a CPO, those are some of the absolute core skill sets that you need to have is, how to manage stakeholders, how to, develop empathy with the customer and with those stakeholders are all some of those critical core habits.
That's awesome. And, you mentioned, that thirst for learning and always wanting to know more and then being able to collaborate from there. There's often a conversation about generalists or specialists as a PM. Within learning pursuit, do you have a recommendation for whether people should try and specialize or be more of a generalist if they do have CPO aspirations?
The best way for me to answer that is yes. I actually think you should have a little of all of it, right? The CPO is literally the only seat in the C-suite next to the CEO that touches every single functional organization. And so to prepare yourself for that C-suite, your ability to actually understand those various functions in context of your product at any point in time are going to be really critical to your future success. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you specialize in a particular area in product management, then you're likely to go deeper in any particular vertical, which is going to give you deeper expertise that you can't get unless you're, if you're in one of these more horizontal product management suites. But to be honest with you, you kind of need to have experienced all of it at some level or another by the time you get up into that senior leadership role. And I hope I answered that.
I think you did. And, I've told the story, in various products that count, webinars or events, but I came from a product marketing background and I was a content manager and then jumped over into the world of product, management full time. And I've, joked many times that I'd be far more empathetic if I knew now what I knew then when I was trying to work with them. But it's also, like you said, you pick up those different skills that end up being so useful to you. So like from marketing, that storytelling and everything, when you're trying to get that cross-functional buy-in from so many other teams is so impactful and useful that you're right, as you work all those collaborations and get to know each different piece, it's going to help you speak the language of all those different departments. That's going to be even more valuable once you reach the level of CPO. And speaking of which, I want to ask, what, in your opinion, makes a great CPO?
Oh, if you were to take a politician and marry a futurist with the best business leader you've ever met, and let's say all of you guys had a baby, that would be a CPO. Does that make any sense? So a great CPO is who has a very, very strong vision for the future. Obviously got there through practical skills and products, so can lead a product team to that vision, but is a phenomenal visionary and can inspire in people internally and externally. So that's the first one. The second is diplomacy. It takes a village to bring a vision to life. It takes a lot of products to bring a vision to life, and it takes a few mistakes to bring a vision to life, and that's where the diplomacy comes in. I've mentioned stakeholder management, and having that as a core competency is so critical. And once you get into the C-suite, you need to inspire your peers. You need to teach your peers. You need to be vulnerable with your peers, right? And having that skill set, the best CPOs in the world that I have met have that skill set in spades. And then I would say, the third thing is really the external perspective. I mentioned this earlier, but to get to the vision, you need to understand, the path there. And that means, in my past, I used to talk to Intel constantly because they were the ones, plotting out, the future in the brains of my products, right? And I needed to understand and influence their direction. In the mobile world, Qualcomm, I used to talk to Qualcomm a lot because, again, they were developing the patents and the core technology for the future in, data and mobility. So just always having that external perspective and can translate that in an incredibly, not just inspirational, but simplistic manner for everyone, not just in the C-suite, but frankly in the company. The best CPOs in the world are really the ones that espouse, the product vision to the entire company, and in a way that's simple enough and specific enough so that every org in the company understands their role in bringing that vision to life.
And you talked about, learning from mistakes to be able to build a great product and bring it to life. And, we talk about the growth mindset a lot here at Products That Count, and seeing every challenge as an opportunity to learn. So I want to know if you could maybe share a little bit more about how mistakes help bring a product to life.
Well, so the underlying assumption is that you learn from your mistakes. And you can think about it at the product level. Let's say you build a feature and you got it wrong, your ability to very quickly, flip that and change it and get it fixed is absolutely critical. The other side of that at a CPO level is you're actually going to get products wrong. And so part of, it's half building the trust so that they know that over time that you will get it right and you're not going to have home runs every time. But the other part is also setting expectations. And I often call this kind of the portfolio management strategy. But, as a CPO, we would map out and align on a strategy that had some higher risk products. And you just set expectations. Now, you don't want all of your products as the higher risk, right? You want, some slam dunks, you want some stretching, maybe in one direction, like adding a new customer, some stretching in another direction, adding, new technology or capabilities. But you want to make sure that you look at your products as a portfolio, and then you spend a lot of your time aligning on that. So then when the mistakes happen, because they will, there's just no way to get it 100% right every single time. You've got, the trust of the team and the buy-in from the team, and the understanding that you're not going to hit, you're not going to bat 1,000. Nobody does.
And I know I'm putting you on the spot here, so I apologize, but I was going to ask if you can think back to one of the hardest learned lessons you had as a CPO, and what that was or what you learned from it.
Oh dear, which one do I tell? Which one can I tell? This was back, I'm going to use the story of when I was leading the consumer headset business at Plantronics. And our goal was very much to not just expand our market share, but we wanted to actually expand the market by making headsets more attractive and to a broader audience, and to take it away just from a business tool and make it more of a consumer tool. And we did some preliminary research, and so that was really kind of the big vision. And we wanted to grow the market, let's just say from being a $200 million market in the US to being $1 billion market in the US through this strategy. And even if we kept our same market share, it grew our business 5x, So we had it all planned out. We had it all laid out. And we put together strategies that we vetted, that included some things that you would expect, like getting the female to adopt, female adoption of headsets, other than in the workplace was very, very low. Whereas, men adopted headsets a lot more readily. And so the team, my team, did the research and managed to convince me that the reason for this was because they were ugly, and that if we made a pink headset, and we did one with diamonds in it. We did one that was gold plated. We were trying to turn headsets into jewelry. We thought for sure the women contingent would take, would adopt it. And fast forward, it did not work. And there was quite a bit of investment in this. We even got our channel partners and, our wireless operator partners and everybody on board with it. We ended up with, a big bag of write-offs at the end of it. But that's a point in case where, I survived it. In fact, I got promoted to CPO after that fact. And the reason why is because it was a piece of our strategy, a key piece of our strategy that was the higher risk piece, and the expectations had been set. And by the way, I put together a business model that showed it successful and showed it failing. And we were hoping for the success, and it was such a big upside that we took the risk, the managed risk. So if there were one thing I could learn, I probably would have done the hardware equivalent of beta testing it beforehand, not have rolled it out so broadly, and the write-offs would have been smaller. But, again, lesson learned. We had those opportunities, a couple years down my tenure, and we managed them better. So is that what you had in mind, Andy?
It was exactly what I had in mind. And, you talked a little bit before about being vulnerable with the team makes a great CPO. So being able to share those stories. And I know when we had Monica Bua, the executive search firm managing director, who I shared a link in the chat for that ebook, one of the things she talked about was she doesn't want to see the PMs who jumped ship when things got challenging. She wants to know what you learned when things got challenging and how you overcame it. And, you shared an example of that. So I think that's important for everyone to hear. And with that, I do want to open the floor to the Q&A. We've got Renee here to pick her brain and learn from her experience. So I hope you do all ask some questions, whether it's in the Q&A feature or directly in the chat, so that we can ask Renee while she's here.
I actually have one to start you off, Renee. You mentioned this portfolio of risk assessment. Do you have certain frameworks you might be able to share with the audience for how you make those decisions and how you assess which products to move forward with in a larger scale or, not so much?
Yeah, there's so many different ones, and I've used them all. But in a nutshell, you've got risk and you've got reward, and you kind of plot it out. And then where the alignment, for your products and your product bets, in order to do that, you need to understand, what it's going to cost, both in hard and soft costs, right? So there's, hard resources, especially in a hardware world, and then there's soft resources in terms of, people and time. But you kind of plot that out, and then what you do is you have, similar to the way you would manage a portfolio, a financial portfolio, you decide, I'm willing to spend 10% of my portfolio on high risk, high growth, high return, bets. I need to spend, let's say 60% of my portfolio, making sure that I keep my current customers happy. And then I can spend the rest of my portfolio in kind of managed bets. And you kind of just map that out in terms of, time, resources, and money.
All right, Reese has helped open up the floor for the questions. So Jeremy Gutenplan asks, can you talk specifically about the jump from VP of product to CPO, and at what point in a startup life cycle that promotion / role makes sense?
So that's a really good question. CPO in a startup is primarily I'm just going to call it a title dressing, because a VP of product in a startup is usually part of the C-suite. And the key that, taking kind of the titles aside, the advice that I'm giving is around conversations that have to do with, the top leaders of the companies, the direct reports to the CEO. And so often in a startup, the VP of product is usually, at that table. And so you really are CPO from that perspective. And the challenge, the difference between a startup and a larger company or a more established company is the things that you worry about in a startup are different than an established company. You often don't have current customers. Your stakeholders usually include investors and investability, and they're kind of, part of your thinking equation. And often you're kind of still trying to figure out that product market fit. And your portfolio is usually very, very small, like 1 or 2 products at the most, unless you're a later stage startup. So the question is, when does it make sense to bring on a CPO or to, suggest that, let's say you're at a startup and you're reporting to the CTO or the VP of engineering or the VP of marketing, and you feel like you should be in the C-suite. I think this will vary startup to startup, but certainly once you start getting into the tens of millions and you as a CPO can start to impact materially those business metrics, and the future strategy, where you're really starting to plot out, not just a product or two, but an entire portfolio of products for growth towards things like IPO or successful exit. So, what do you think, guys? Did I answer that okay? If you asked that question, I would love your feedback in the chat. Okay.
Sure. So thank you. That was helpful. And our next question, Colleen Heidgerken asks, have you had to build a strategy at a new company when you don't have deep domain experience? How to go about that?
So there is always a learning curve when you join a new company, even if you don't have deep domain experience, or even if you have some of the experience, there's just a massive learning curve. And so depending on the size of the company, the first thing I always do is leverage the team. Your best source of knowledge is the team in place, and make sure that you're really listening to them and you're getting their perspective. Then typically what I do once when I'm onboarding and getting myself up to speed, it would be a mistake to go right to strategy. What you need to do is just understand the business. So the first, I start with the team. The second is, my key stakeholders. I spend a lot of time with sales, a lot of time with engineering, CTO, if there's the office of the CTO, obviously the CEO, making sure I get everybody's perspective. Trust me, it will be conflicting. So, but you got to always start with that stakeholder, that stakeholder perspective. And as you're having all of these conversations, you're learning a lot about the business, the customer, but then you always, I go outside, again, that outside perspective. I go talk to customers. I try to understand their future. You go to look at your key supply chain partners and technology partners, to go try to understand them. Rationalize, or have your team rationalize your learnings with the roadmap, and then you kind of build it from there. But you can't just walk in day one and espouse a strategy and a vision and a space, whether you know the space or not know the space, because you do not have the knowledge, and you'll lose instant credibility if you go in day one with that strategy. But again, it's just having that growth mindset. Listen, echo back what you hear. So yeah, sales is a great example. Well, I've been asking for, widget Z now for 5 years. I've got $30 million of revenue that I could have closed last year had I had widget Z. And I really want you to add widget Z to the roadmap. And so what you do is you go, okay, well, thank you. Let me see if I understood that. You think widget Z is really important and that you could add 30 million of revenue to the roadmap. Yes, I do. Is there something you would take off of the roadmap in lieu of widget Z, right? And that's the kind of conversation that you start to engage in that start to help you inform your strategy.
Awesome. Thank you, Corleen, for that question. Do we have any other questions? We'll sit here in the uncomfortable silence for a sec to see if anything else jogs.
Maybe Reese has another insightful question.
Well, we talked about going from VP to CPO. What about the opposite side, that first step, getting to that product lead position? Do you have any tricks? You mentioned listening to the team. Obviously, that seems like a great strategy. Are there any other things that we can watch out for, and when that moment is to ask for that jump?
Yeah. So there's always kind of key, in any organization, there's always key planning cycles. And those planning cycles are the times that you should really, like, if leading a product line versus just a product is something you've aspired to do, well, first and foremost, hopefully you've made those aspirations known, but equally or more important is you got to look at these planning moments where you start to see and you can start to influence, hey, this is why I think this should be a product line. This is why. And oh, by the way, I would like to lead it. And this is, this is why I think I'm the right person to lead it. That being said, if that conversation comes out of the blue, it will fall flat on, its face. You've had to, lead by bringing in all those things that I talked to you. So the path to the C-suite is the exact same path to the steps in between, right? The altitude just changes. So if you're a product manager and you've gotten your external perspective, you've worked with your stakeholders so you know what's possible in what time frame, you know what the customers want, you know the technology as associated with your product line, you know what's right, what's wrong, then you should start to make sure that that information is constantly being communicated to your leadership, to your stakeholders, and really start to level up your conversation beyond just kind of the get it done today and to now, which is hard, by the way. It's so easy to sit here in a webinar and say, oh yeah, just spend all the time externally, and you're like, oh my God, I cannot even get out of my seat because I have so much to do. So it's really about carving out that time and having some discipline, because you really can't and won't get ahead unless you are able to do that.
So really it's about locking in that time each week, something to make sure those conversations are happening or at the forefront and stay at the forefront of the people that you need to influence at some point.
Yeah, well, influence, you need to, have the external perspective of customers and technology and trends. You just have to carve out the time. You can do that through reading. You can do that by coffee chats with peers. You can do that. I mean, there's so many different ways you can do that. But making that part of it and calendar it, put it in your calendar it's not going to happen otherwise. It's kind of like exercising. You know, you got to make it
a specific color, and that's it.
Yeah. Set a goal.
We had another question just come in from Nihar, who asks, how do you evaluate yourself, i.e. gauge whether you're doing a good job in your role and find out what you want to improve?
Well, this is going to sound flippant, but it's just, you need to ask. And there's a lot of ways to get that feedback. You can do it blind. You can, do it direct. I made it absolutely a part and a habit during every one-on-one, every opportunity that I could get, is to say, how is it going? How am I doing? What can I do better? And how you respond, like if somebody is brave enough to give you honest feedback, how you respond to that matters so much. So what if, let me give you an example. So let's say somebody says, Renee, I know you think the vision is clear, but I don't get it. All right. Your first reaction is like, in my head, I'm thinking, I have just literally spent 2/3 of my waking time working on this vision, and she or he just criticized it, right? No, body language can't say that. Your words can't say that. The very first thing out of your mouth has to be, thank you so much for that feedback. Feedback is such a gift, and it had to be hard to give that to me. So thank you. And then engage them, right? Like, well, how do you think I could do this better? Do you have any ideas? Who else do you think I should talk to about this? Do you think this is a shared perspective? Really dig in to get that feedback. So that's my favorite way to do it. There are other ways to do it. You can do a 360. If your company doesn't do it, there's a bunch of tools on the internet, and a 360 is, and by the way, just keep it simple. What are the, two things that you want me to keep doing that you think I do well? And what are the 2 things that you really think that, that I could do better and you'd like to see me do better? And just, send it to your superiors, send it to your peers, send it to your team. And if you have multiple layers underneath you, make sure it goes to your whole team, and make it anonymous so that it's, it's safe to give that feedback.
That can't be easy. That's one of the hardest things for anybody to hear, is when you ask for the feedback and then it's actually given.
By the way, the only thing that's harder than that, Reese, is actually to give it. It is very hard to give, especially when there's a reporting relationship, or it's somebody who's senior, a level or 2 above you. To be that direct is brave, is so brave. But so necessary.
It sounds like it's necessary on both sides to learn how, and that's one of the things that could help boost somebody into that level of the C-suite. It's learning how to manage that.
Yeah. I'm also a really big fan, and when you have that feedback, and again, if you're interested in taking on additional responsibilities, one of the pieces of advice I have is, when you have constructive feedback, don't leave them hanging. Offer suggestions, right? Maybe you might want to consider doing brown bag lunches, and having a conversation with everyone so that they understand that vision a little bit better. Or when I worked over at Google, they used to have these tech chats, and maybe you could host one of those.
Definitely. We had another question come through from David Grossoff, who said, in companies with product managers, product line managers, and brand managers, what might be the value of a CPO interposed between that pooled expertise of those folks and the CEO, CTO, and CMO?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question, because I don't think it changes. The CPO's role is to really, drive the product strategy of the company. And corollary to that is really the business strategy of the company, as it relates directly to the products and services. So I don't think the fact that you have brand managers and product managers and product line managers changes any of that, because they all need to, there are still portfolio decisions that need to be made. There are still customers that need to be served. There are still, products.
If I may,
yeah.
I'm wondering what's the good example of a kind of added value for having the CPO in the C-suite to sort of mediate, I imagine, what is being learned through the product management process, the product line management process, managing end of life products and understanding, listening, obviously closer to the customers. So what's that differentiation of function of the CPO?
Yeah, so David, thank you for speaking up. In a nutshell, it's making sure that those in the C-suite are bought in, and that when there's conflict, that it's navigated. So alignment of the vision at the C-suite level is critical, and that's typically a CPO that will do that. Occasionally there's a chief strategy officer, and you can have too many people, but at that stage, then the CPO kind of grabs the CTO and the chief strategy officer, and you create a vision triad, and you align that way, right? So it's alignment on strategy and vision. It's alignment on resource and resource balancing. And it's navigating conflict, right? Because conflict always happens. There's, competing voices, and making sure that the conflict is navigated from the tops down is really critical. So let me give you an example. Let's say the brand managers report in through marketing, and the product managers don't. And they don't report, and let's say there's a CMO, but there's no CPO. It only goes up to the VP of product, and let's say that person reports over to the CTO. Then you're missing a massive opportunity, and frankly, unless the CTO is really a CPO in disguise, you're going to make poor decisions as a company, because you don't have that product view at the table. And when I say product view, it's a multi-dimensional, multi-function view. It really is. It's not a narrow view. I don't know if that answered your question, David.
That certainly puts flesh on the bones.
Okay, thank you. I hope that was helpful. Feel free to ping me offline if you think I can be of service or help.
Do we have any more questions? We probably got time for one or two more. Well, hopefully that means everyone is now prepared to progress through their careers and earn the role of CPO. If there are no more questions, and as Renee said, you can always ping us offline or afterwards. We're always here to help you guys. And I want to thank everyone for attending today. This was fun for me. I hope it was fun for all of you as well. Thank you also, and as always, to Renee for being an incredible expert and so generous with your wisdom. It was excellent. And I'll hand things back over to Stephen and Reese to close things out. Oh, we have one last question right under the finish line. We'll ask it. Urvashi asks, the question they have is, do you add value as a product head in a merger, especially when the purchaser does not have a product team?
Absolutely. It's really interesting. When I'm not CPO, products account, I'm on the partner team. I'm a partner over at Mighty Capital, and this is something we look at all the time. What we're really seeing is that a lot of acquisitions are often originated out of the CPO office, and the reason for it is because when you start looking at, we were talking about that resource graph before, often you have a fixed number of resources, but you have the desire to expand maybe into a new market or expand to a new customer. And quite often the quickest way to do that is through acquisition, but that strategy, that thinking, and that portfolio comes from the CPO. And so obviously in a merger where the CPO is the initiator, they will be the ambassador to the acquired company. In a merger of two equals, it can equally be important because you're going to have to rationalize the portfolio. You're going to have to be thinking about, customer overlap and customer synergies. And then you'll also have to be thinking about resource pooling, where are their efficiencies, where are their inefficiencies, and all of that conversation is usually driven from a CPO, with obviously the long-term strategy and vision in mind.
Well, thank you, Urvashi, for that last minute question, and Renee again for the great response.